here at the Imperial Irrigation District. It's November the 22nd, 2019, and we're talking with Ed Smith, who retired as general manager of the Palo Verde Irrigation District. Ed, thank you very much for joining us and being willing to participate in the Colorado River Board Oral History Project. So, one of the interesting things about your background, Ed, is that as I recall, you jumped into the general manager spot at PVID from the outside. That is to say, you didn't come up from inside PVID, but you grew up in the valley. I mean, you were a businessman here, and I think that gives you a unique perspective about water issues. What were your thoughts as you were growing up in the 50s and 60s, and ultimately became GM PVID? But what were your thoughts about Colorado River issues while you were growing up? Were they uppermost in your mind, or was it not an issue?
Not really. I was, as you said, I grew up in these desert valleys and in an agriculture family, and really, until I got with the district or in the district, not a lot of concerns. But I have a lot of history with the river. I think in some notes I sent you that I grew up riding my bicycle down to the river below Morelos Dam and fishing about once or twice a week. And of course, the water doesn't go past Morelos Dam anymore. So there's a lot of stretches that I got a lot of memories on the river of things that don't exist anymore that used to exist.
Well, go pick up on a couple of those things, because I think most people are not familiar with that, with things that were there once that are no longer there.
Well, they've done a lot of, they put a whole lot of money into that Hunter's Hole restoration project between Morelos and the San Luis border. And Hunter's Hole was a little lake down there that, as a kid, we used to go and fish that thing all the time, and it was a fairly substantial, quite a few acre lake that was on the old river channel. And when it dried up, and they're pumping into it now and making one of the restoration sites, kind of like the MSCP. I've boated that stretch from Morelos to San Luis, and which is now, you can Jeep it now if you want to, but if you can get past the Border Patrol, you can put your buggies in there. But so anyway, that was my beginnings, and then I stayed in the desert my whole life. I went to University of Arizona in Tucson for 4 years, but other than that, I raised in Gadsden, in the south end of the Yuma Valley, and then after college, I moved to Imperial Valley for about a year, and then moved up to Blythe for 40-some years, and involved in production agriculture. I had a fertilizer and farm chemical business that I managed for about 30 years, and then I was the managing partner, and my partner bought me out, and one of the directors from PVID, who'd been one of my biggest customers there, came and knocked on my door one day and said, "Would you like to come run the irrigation district?" And thought, that'd be okay. Something to do.
That was in 2000, I think?
2000. And
as I recall, though, your dad was also in the agricultural business.
He was a foreman for a produce company in Yuma for 35 years or so. He a company that grew produce in Imperial Valley and Phoenix and Yuma, and he owned a little farm down there too.
In Arizona or California?
In Somerton or Gadsden.
Yeah, okay.
Gadsden area.
So you joined PVID in 2000, 19, 20 years ago. What struck you when you walked in the door? I mean, here I am, PVID. Did you really know the agency at that time?
Not really. I didn't really have a clue what my job was. Fortunately, they had a really good staff. The water department ran well, the office ran well, and the shop ran well, and they just needed a manager. So I moved in there. I started one day, and I just started opening drawers and reading files and reading all the historical documents I could and reading every employee file, and just till I read everything in that room till I got tired of reading, and then I'd go get in a ditch bank and get my pistol and shoot muskrats out of the ditches for an hour or two every day, and then the next day go back in and just read all the documents. I just voracious reader during that period. And
What about how familiar were you with the interagency events going on at that time? And let me prompt you a little bit. PVID and MWD, PVID and IID.
really not at all. Other than when I had the fertilizer business and the test following program 3 or 4 years previous to that went on. I was watching it to see how it affected my business and whatnot.
You're talking about the program with Metropolitan.
The first, yes, that they had a test following for 2 years or 3 years, and so as I said that I was watching that very close to see how it would affect my business,
And did it, or?
Somewhat, yeah.
Because there was concern, as I recall, that by reducing the amount of farmed acreage in Palo Verde, that there would be ancillary damages. And I think Met tried to take care of those, but
and the big program they did in that first and the first program was hard to really say how much damage was done, because farming was really got real tough right then, and the government put that payment in kind, that PIC program out, where they also paid farmers not to grow cotton and wheat. And so, and actually, it buffered the Met program a little bit, because they were allowed to double dip some of the ground that they had in the PIC program. They also put into the water transfer program and got paid twice for it. So.
And everyone was okay with that.
They got away with it. And so it really didn't, but it did, it wasn't all double dipped. So so the acreage went down quite a bit for a while there. And it did affect things, but it was, it wasn't dramatic.
As I recall, correct me if I'm wrong, PVID has somewhere in the range of 90,000 or 100,000 acres under irrigation.
Just under 100,000.
Just under 100. And how much of that has been taken out because of the fallowing program?
Probably the average of about 15 to 20% of the acreage every year.
Okay. And how did the fallowing program work? Was there one farm that went out and that was 20%, or did each farmer reduce?
No, the way that thing is set up, it's what had to be set up for it to be legal was every landowner got a percentage of their ground eligible to put in. So if let's say that MWD made a call for 20% of the acreage for the next period, then if you had 100 acres, you could fallow 20 acres. If you had 1,000 acres, you could fallow 200. And so it was even across the board based on what you owned.
But you weren't required to fallow, were you? Or were you?
If you signed up your acreage, you were.
Okay.
There was a $3,100 and something payment per acre made up front, and if you took that upfront money and signed up this acreage, then you were required to, when they made a fallowing call, to fallow, and you couldn't opt out.
And so how is that program working today?
Well, it's gotten pretty complex. It's gotten pretty complex. The politics have gotten involved in it, and it's not as smooth as it could be.
Well, okay. Well, let me prompt you a little bit. When the program started, and for a long time, actually, Palo Verde Irrigation District and Metropolitan had pretty good relationship.
Hmm.
I mean, it was probably the friendliest ag agency that Met had.
Hmm.
I think that's changed a little bit over
Hmm.
time. Uh, can you talk about that change a little bit, or are we getting into some areas here that you really just don't want to get into, which is fine.
Um, think about that a little bit.
Okay. Uh, let's talk a little bit then about when you came in, as you were starting, California was into what came to be known as the 4.4 soft
Hmm.
landing. Do you remember that?
Yeah, and I hadn't been there but about 30 days, maybe 60 days, and Virgil Jones, who was I don't know if he's a board president, but he was kind of the guy that was involved with the Colorado board and whatnot, came into my office and said, tomorrow, Ed, I want you to go to the airport and pick up Bob Johnson from the Bureau, and Dennis Underwood, and a couple other guys from MWD. We're going to have a meeting, and we're going to put a water transfer deal together. Okay, so that was that. That was the start of the following program, the 35-year program as it exists now, and so I was there from fortunately from day one, and sat in on quite a bit of the negotiations and worked with the bureau, and then prior to finishing the MWD final program, or beginning of the final program, there was some talk about this soft landing not coming about, and the bureau cutting off water to California, and Coachella got real scared, and some of their bankers told the vegetable guys they didn't know if they could bank them or not. So they came to us, and we put a short-term program together for 1 year, where Coachella bought water from us, or we forbear water, paid us not to farm, and the forbearance went to them. And before that program even finished, the QSA finally got signed, and then everybody knew where they was going to be, and Coachella ended up not needing the water, but we put a short term, and that was an interesting deal because we had a meeting at our office with some of our directors and some of the Coachella directors and the attorneys and whatnot, and set down all the pretty much laid down the groundwork, and their attorney got in a car and had the guy with him drive, and he stayed on the cell phone with me all the way back to Riverside, and wrote the program up during that period, and we signed it about a week later. That's all it took.
So the program was written on a cell phone, I mean, a conversation.
Mm-hmm. Pretty much.
So that happened within, as you said, 30 days of you coming in. What surprised you about PVID and its relationships with so many other agencies when you came into the job? I mean, were you aware of its relationship with MWD and Coachella?
No, but I was tickled because I was well embraced. I mean, Tom Levy and different people come to me and said, "We're glad you're here because we like you and we think you'll do good things with us." And the cool thing about the relationships with those other agencies was that We were also going through that period where they were trying to get the Lower Colorado River Multi-Species Conservation Program done, and PVID was never, never out front on spending a lot of money and a lot of lawyering up and whatnot. And so we had a full-time lawyer, but he didn't even attend the meetings. Most of the other agencies, like the MSCP meetings and stuff, they always sent their attorneys and whatnot. And fortunately, because I was a newbie, the Steve Abbott, who is the attorney for Coachella, and Bill Swan, who is attorney for IID, whenever something would come up on one of those MSCP plans that they were proposing, they would call me and say, Ed, you know what this is going to do to you? Or, this is a really good deal. You need to support it. Okay. And so I got a lot of information from the other agencies because they wanted to keep the relationships going. And they knew that I didn't know what I was doing. So it worked out great, and got some really good relationships through that way.
I should mention for the record, Bill Swan was an attorney. Actually, he was licensed in Arizona and California. Great guy. Passed away several years ago.
Yes.
But there is an oral history of Bill on file with the Colorado River Board. So that's there if anyone wants to check into that. Your attorney was who?
Well, it was Roy Mann initially, and then Dave Saunders worked for him. As I understand it, the way that Roy Mann came about as the attorney there was there's like 12,000 acres of priority 4 water up on the Palo Verde Mesa, and it had never been developed. And a bunch of investors came in, and through Desert Entry, they were going to develop that. And he was the attorney for that group. And they had it pretty well put together where they were going to develop most of that mesa. And actually, they tell me that the 3 gates there at the river, the third gate was going to go to deliver water to a pump system to pump water up to furnish water for that 12,000 acres up there. And Roy Mann was the guy that was their attorney. This was in the 50s. And anecdotally, they said that they had it all put together, and then somebody came along and had a better idea for financing it. And so they delayed it a little bit. And while they delayed it, Stuart Udall sent a letter to PVID stating, Secretary of Interior Udall sent a letter to PVID stating that you cannot cross property of the United States of America with your pipeline to get to your ground on the mesa. And say anecdotally, PVID always assumed it was Coachella and IID that talked the secretary into not letting them do that because they didn't want that 12,000 acres to be developed, knowing that there's going to be shortages. So,
did you find out different later, or
no,
nothing ever changed your mind on that?
I don't know. And that was before me. I have seen the letter from. I had the letter in my hand from Udall. It's on file there, saying that you can't cross the property of the USA, and
yeah, who knows? In the early part of PVID's history, long before you or I or anything, the early 1900s, PVID was, well, it wasn't even PVID yet, but it was gravity fed. It was all gravity fed. Mm-hmm. Does that maintain today, or?
There's probably 700 or 800 acres, maybe I'm wrong. Couldn't be much over 1,000 or so acres in that valley that need a little bit of a lift, and it's not pumped. It's just a lift. There'll be an irrigation canal that comes to a couple hundred acre block that's a little higher, and it'll just lift up to another. There's no pumping within the valley for irrigation.
Okay, so that's a little bit like we can draw an analogy maybe to Indian Headgate Rock Dam.
Yes.
That lifts the river 3 or 4 feet to gravity feet. One of the things that you noted in, as you and I were exchanging, or you were exchanging emails with the Colorado River Board, you made a specific mention of the Palo Verde Diversion Dam title change.
Hmm.
Can you talk about the significance of that a little bit? Why you noted that it's the only diversion dam on the river that the United States doesn't own.
Hmm.
What? Why is that important? Why was the title change important?
You know, if you follow the history of PVID from the very beginning of the development of that valley, those people up there are pretty damn independent. The PVID, or the Palo Verde Valley, butted heads with the Bureau of Reclamation for years because the Bureau was focused on Imperial Valley and the Yuma project. And Blythe, everything that happened in Blythe, they developed on their own. It was nothing there was a Bureau project. Everything there, and I don't know if you're aware, but a lot of the canals in the Yuma County water users that is all owned by the Bureau. That's all Bureau property still. Nothing in Palo Verde was ever built by the Bureau. So they're pretty independent. And even though we have very good relationship with the Bureau, when it come time that they paid the dam off, and the congressional act said once it's paid off, title will be turned over to the Palo Verde Irrigation District. So the farmers and the board got together and said, well, Ed, go get the title. And so I talked to the area manager, and they said, well, we'll get back to it. And then their attorneys got to me and said, okay, but we're going to have to consult with CRIT. We're going to have to do a CEQA. We're going to have to do a NEPA. We're going to have to do this. We're going to have to do that. And so I had Dave Saunders write them a letter that said, read the congressional act. And I went to a meeting in Denver about a month later, and Bob Johnson said, Ed, you can have the dam.
And why is that a good thing? I mean,
I don't know.
You have to maintain PVID has to maintain it. I
Well,
presume
we did anyway. We had we'd already come to the point where we'd found out that they were already telling us, before that there was. They'd always come up there, and we needed some riprap poured in or something like that along the lower end. If it was taking the bank out or something, they would do it. And then they got to a point they said, you know what, that's not our obligation anymore, it's yours. And that was when they still owned it. And so we did the research and looked at the contracts and figured out who was responsible for maintenance and whatnot. And we were. So farmers just decided they'd rather own it.
Okay, well, it's just interesting to note that it is the only diversion structure on the river.
As I understand, IID has paid theirs off, but have not taken title to it. And now whether they could or not, I don't know. But
And one of the agencies that most people really don't know anything, very, very little about, is the Bard Water District. Maybe it's because they have such a small entitlement. Maybe it's because they're not actively involved on so many things. But what's the relationship between? Well, tell us about Bard Water District and how you work with how they work with PVID on any particular issue, because you're the closest agency to them.
well, we collaborated with them quite often on things like issues with the Regional Water Quality Control Board whenever Regional Water Quality Control Board would pass something down to PVID, we knew that Bard was going to be next, so I would always call and talk to their manager and tell them, here's what's coming, and you might want to come sit in on some of these meetings in Palm Springs that we were having to go to and that type of thing. So we worked with them on things like that. And then when after I retired, probably not 30 days after I retired from PVID, Bill Hazenkamp spoke at a vegetable growers meeting in Human, had dinner with him, and he asked me if I would do some consulting work for MWD. And one of the things they were working on was a fallowing program with BARD. And he asked me if I would take that project on. And so started working with them in May of that year, and then by the beginning of next year, we had a 2-year pilot program put together where that valley is very similar to Yuma in that its primary production is vegetables, winter vegetables, and they will rotate Sudan grass, wheat, sometimes a short cotton crop in between these vegetable crops. And most of those are not, with a short crop like that, they're not really a real good economic driver. They're just something to fill in, and so you don't leave the ground bare and not get any money back on it. So we put together a program whereby up to 20% of that little valley, there's 7,000 acres, so up to 20% in any given year can be laid out during, I believe, from like April 15th or something like that to, I'd have to look at my notes, April through till like the end of August.
So their BARD is roughly a tenth the size of
Yes.
PVID?
Yes.
Is that, and where do they stand in terms of priority?
They're number 2. Palo Verde's number 1 unquantified, and BARD Water District is number 2 unquantified. So that's why MWD wanted to put something together with them, because they were the number 2 priority. And anyway, it's a small amount of water. It's a small acreage, but it's working well for them, and it gives MWD a little bit more water.
Okay. So that's underway right now.
And we did 2 years pilot program, and then when that was up, the government put that program together where Las Vegas and MWD and I think CAP and the feds went together and put some money in for projects, and they switched to that government project for about 2 years. That's over, and we're currently getting ready to sign a 7-year deal with them now for short-term fallowing, what we call short-term fallowing, which is in between the vegetable crops. And
when you say we, you mean MWD?
MWD, and yes,
Yeah.
I'm talking as MWD right now.
Okay. All right. So that's one agency on the river that you've engaged with. There are a couple of much larger agencies on the river that you probably worked with. What was, while you were general manager, what was your relationship with Imperial Irrigation District? You get along with those guys?
We got along just fine. If there was any ag issues, we always collaborated on them. If at Colorado River Board meetings, if there was an ag issue of any kind, we always made sure that we were working together on the same page, and we really got along with everybody.
Coachella?
Coachella, it's been
What about, well, PVID has always stood on the high ground because of their number 1 priority.
Mm-hmm.
Did the other agencies give you a hard time about that, or
No, not really, because
I mean, they just accepted it?
that's the way it was, and the numbers don't change down there. Didn't change down there very much. They knew with number 1 priority, you still can only put so much water on a piece of ground, and up there it was our calculations or our contract was a diversion less return, and so with the drain system we had up there, the more you put on, the more it returned. So the water the ground could only consumptively use so much water, and so it didn't change much, and they were never able to find anything at Palo Verde that could use 10 or 15 acre feet per acre. So
Well, that would be a lot of water.
yeah, so
Well, having grown up in Yuma, and I'm going to change track a little bit here. When one flies into or out of Yuma, Arizona, there's a lot of water down there in canals and I personally am not familiar with all of that, but you might be. Uh, can you describe that water system a little bit? I know you didn't work for Yuma Water, but looking down at the desert scape from 5,000 feet, there are canals running everywhere. It's almost even hard to pick out the Colorado River. There are so many streams and what's that all about? Where's all that water coming from and going to?
Well, there's a part of it. The largest that you might see, especially towards the south end, is there's two or three large drain systems in there. There's a large drain that goes back in right there, just at the border at San Luis, crosses into Mexico, and I think that there's some return flow credit given for that, or the United States gets credit for that, and I'm not real familiar with that, but they are pretty careful about, since they don't have a river to dump into like Palo Verde did. They're pretty careful about metering their water so that it's all used before it gets to the end of the line and doesn't have to get dumped into the drain to go to Mexico.
So that water is originating in the Colorado?
It originated, okay. All right. It comes under the Colorado from the California side. There's an aqueduct built. I think Teddy Roosevelt christened it or something. And it goes under the Colorado River and it goes into Yuma, and that supplies municipal and farm water for that whole valley. It is Colorado River water, but for some reason, back then they decided to take it from that side. And it's upstream, I guess, probably for elevation, gravity purposes, I guess, is where that is. But that's where it all comes from.
So most of the canals and other structures that you see in Yuma, and there are a lot of them, tend to be drainage from agricultural lands, or are they delivering water to agriculture?
Both.
Or both?
Both.
Okay. All right. In the early part of the century, PV was primarily, as I recall, cotton and alfalfa.
Mm-hmm.
Alfalfa uses a lot of water. Well, cotton uses a lot of water too. Has that changed over time? That cropping pattern?
No, actually, it's kind of interesting because when I was still in the farm chemical business, and I can't remember the dates, but back the first time California had a real big drought, 25 years, 30 years ago, whatever. And we used to have a lot of contracts there for tomatoes, onions, garlic, for commercial, not fresh market, but cannery tomatoes, garlic to make garlic powder of, and onions for dehy onions and that sort of thing. And when that drought came about and they kept talking about Northern California was running out of water, I thought, we've got it made.
Northern California or Southern California?
Northern California was running out of water at that
Okay.
time. Northern California's having a big drought. And I assumed that would be a heck of a deal for us because those guys would just bring more of those contract crops down there, which were the high value crops. As it turned out, the guys up there took what little bit of water they had and put it all into those vegetables, and we lost most of those contracts because they quit growing Sudan grass and green chop for their cows, and then so our alfalfa and whatnot really took off because we got stuck with the forage crops, and they got the high value vegetable crops for a while. And but that's kind of turning around right now. There's a lot of organic potatoes and organic garlic and onions and stuff starting to come back to the valley there for these last few years. So
When you say organic, you mean not artificially fertilized? What do you mean by organic?
organic, they don't spray them, or they're not. Well, they spray them with chemicals that are organic, and they can't use a lot of poisons and stuff on them, and
That's high value stuff.
that's high value
The
stuff.
market.
So it's starting to come back. They're starting to get some of that and replace some of the alfalfa and whatnot with that stuff. So, but it just the hard thing for water people to understand is that the economics of farming is you farm what makes money, and that changes from year to year. And it's not like, okay, we open the valve this year and we close the valve next. No, it's what's going to make me money this year. And so,
Well, speaking of money, and without getting into individual farmers, but let's step back to the MWD fallowing program. Generally speaking, how did the farmers do with that? I mean, did they come out okay?
it was great. It was great for them. When the program was put together, initially, there's three things initially that were done. Number one is, as you mentioned, the soft landing, California 4.4 soft landing. The fallowing program was a part of that. There was Metropolitan had a program, a canned program I saw several times. They presented to people on how we're going to get back to 4.4. And right on the top was 100,000 feet of water fallowing in PVID. And so we kind of had the upper hand on them because they were telling everybody that, and we knew they were telling everybody that. So, okay, we know you want to buy my 55 Corvette, so now it's just about how much money I'm going to get out of it. And so they kind of had, So anyway, but I think Dennis Underwood stated several times that they probably wouldn't really use that fallowing program a whole lot. They didn't think they would need to because there was a lot of water around then. And so a couple of things were done to make sure that it wasn't just a placeholder. One is that that $3,180 or whatever an acre that they paid up front to lock that acreage in was to make sure that it was, there was some money for the farmers in doing this, in reserving this land. And then they set a minimum each year. You have to take 7% of the valley and fallow it. You can't go below that, because one of the board members, as he stated to me, he said it's like somebody coming in and giving you an option on your farm to build houses someday, and giving you a big check up front, and then not doing anything, and somebody else might come along with a better deal. So you better make sure that this guy that put the money up is going to prove up on something. And then another part in there is that by the end of 35 years, they have to have called for 50% of the eligible water over the 35 years. And that was thinking that they would never use that much. That was just to make sure that they get some money out of the deal. And because they were afraid, well, as it turned out, they maxed that thing out for several years, pulled the full 25% or 29% out of the valley year after year for quite a while. It's been down and up, but so it's been used a lot more than they thought it would. And nobody's really complained about that because, when I was working there in the district, different farmers I knew from Imperial Valley would drive through going to someplace and go through Blythe and say, man, all your guys got brand new balers, brand new tractors. This grounds are clean. There's no weeds. This valley is just, wish we could do that in Imperial Valley. And so it was kind of everybody wanted a piece of it besides Palo Verde.
Interesting. The city of Blythe, which was really started by Thomas Blythe, I believe his first name was, who was the original PVID before there was a PVID. But Blythe has never been a real growth capital. What's going on in Blythe right now with respect to PVID? And what I'm asking is that some ag agencies are seeing some pressure to build homes and take ag land out. You plant house seeds and you grow housing developments. Has there been any pressure in PVID to do that, or is it
not really
pretty stable?
Not really. Blythe is not growing. When I moved to Blythe, and again, we go back to what's the impact of the fallowing on the valley. When I moved there, there was 3 or 4 banks, and back then, everybody that bought a car or financed a farm or did anything went to the local banker and did it right there in house right there, and so there was always quite a few bank people there, and as time has gone on, you don't deal with that anymore. You deal with Vegas or Phoenix or LA for your banking. If you farm more than 40 acres, you go out of town. Even though you got a branch there, you don't deal with those people. You deal other places. There was 3 or 4 cotton gins. Those cotton gins all had a staff, people operating the gin, bookkeeping people and whatnot. There's one gin now. There's only one gin south of Tehachapi Pass in California anymore, and that's in Blythe. None in Imperial Valley, none in Indio anymore. There was I counted one time, and I can't remember. There was 3 feedlots there that were over 100,000 head each, and there was 15 or 16 small feedlots in that valley, and they've just all gone. Had nothing to do with the fallowing program. They just, it's just things have evolved. They don't have near the feedlots over in Imperial Valley they used to have. It's just times have changed, and
well, are they relocating to cheaper areas or areas where there's more water, or they're not selling the land for any fantastic?
No,
profit?
the cattle I think is going back to the Midwest, and they've just Texas and the Midwest, and they just don't, the feedlots. I don't know why. Haven't been a cattleman, but I know the feedlot deal isn't what it used to be, and they just dried up, and so the whole economy of that. Well, and there was about at least 12 or 14 melon and lettuce shippers in that valley when I was there, when I first moved there. They all 3, 4, 5, 600 acres of lettuce, same with cantaloupes or whatever. And that's totally changed. All the vegetables have, most of them gone to Yuma. There's some in Imperial Valley still, but because of right to work laws and various issues like that, the production in Yuma is so much cheaper than it is in Arizona than it is in California. So as soon as they leave Salinas, they head straight to Yuma. They used to have to stop in areas like Wilcox, Parker, Las Cruces, and because of the weather, and pick up in between the move from Salinas to Yuma. but the varieties, they've done so much with plant breeding and whatnot that they can just go from Salinas to Yuma, plant early, plant late in Yuma, and stay there until they go back to Salinas. They don't need the vegetables in these outlying areas like Wilcox and Las Cruces and Blythe, and so they've just all concentrated in Yuma, and there went the vegetable business. You can still grow them there, but it's the not only is it the California laws, but in Imperial Valley here you got Mexicali for a labor source. In Yuma you got San Luis. Well, those guys have to be bused all the way to Blythe, and then bus back home every day to work in the fields. And being a small area, there's no. Some of the locals say, well, if we ought to just, build a cooler here and then they'll come. No, that's not the whole deal. I mean, there's coolers there already that aren't being used, but you don't have forklift companies, you don't have trucking companies. Everything has to be brought in from another area for a small lettuce deal, and so it's just gone.
So the interesting thing there is that it's not only water. There are lots of factors impacting
Absolutely.
what's going on here in the South.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Ed, coming from the commercial side into the public service side, from your background in business, what surprised you the most when you started at PVID?
What surprised? Well, I don't know about surprise. The thing that tickled me the most was that I didn't have accounts receivable. That was the perfect job.
What? Well, now wait a minute. You have to explain that.
Well, when you're out peddling chemicals and fertilizer, you got all these farmers that owe you a couple of $100,000 or this or that, and you hope they do good and pay you, and you have to know which ones will and won't. But the irrigation district, we got all the water. There's no other place to get it. If you don't pay your bill by this certain date, we cut you off. And you pay in advance. You don't pay in arrears. And so that's a pretty neat deal.
Make things a little easier, I suppose. Well, how about on the political side, though? I mean, did you have when you started as general manager and during your tenure, were you aware of the relationships that PVID had with other entities like the other water agencies, the Colorado River Board of California? Had you ever even heard of it?
No. No, and in fact, a lot of that stuff, as you know, Virgil Jones was the guy that did all that, and he kind of held those visits to the other agencies away because that was his territory, and it took a while before I gained his confidence to where he would actually let me go to meetings, and but that finally worked out.
I probably should mention Virgil Jones was a board member of PVID for a long, long time, and he chaired the Colorado River Board for several terms, many terms. He passed away in the year
probably 2004 or 5,
something like that. But he passed away at a time when we were just beginning this oral history process.
Yeah.
And Virgil was one of the first people that we wanted to interview because he's such an interesting guy. Well, unfortunately, we never got the chance to do that. However, there is a book available called Reflections on the Colorado, which was produced by the Colorado River Water Users Association. And Virgil Jones is one of the key interviewees in that book. So anyone looking to take a look at Virgil's background and whatnot is directed to that book. There are copies available at the Colorado River Board or the Colorado River Water Users Association. So Virgil was a unique and interesting and terrific guy.
He was a great guy. He did hold the political part of it very tightly. And in fact, I'll tell you a little story. The first time, I'd been there for quite a while, and they were having the Colorado River Board meetings, and I talked to these guys from their agencies, and they all took their lawyers and their managers, and Virgil was the only one that went for Blythe. And I talked to who was the board president at that time, and I said, I'd like to go to one of those. We'll just drive over there and go. Okay. So I drive over, and the meeting's just about to start, and I kind of come in the back door and sit in the back, and Virgil's chairing the meeting, and he stands up and he said, "Ed, what the hell are you doing here?" And then he introduced me to the rest of them as the new manager at PVID. But anyway, as I say, after a while we worked well together.
What would you say about your tenure at PVID? What do you look back on and say, I'm proud that happened while I was general manager?
Well, and when they were talking about interviewing me, I'm thinking, well, what the hell does anybody want to interview me for? But I was there from the day one on the negotiations for the 35-year fallowing program. It's probably 3 years after I got there that they finally signed the MSCP, and I went to all the steering committee meetings for the multi-species conservation program, and was there. I wasn't a big player, but I was there and involved in it and signing on that and whatnot. And the last thing that we started while I was there was starting replacing the three gates on the dam. We got one of them almost finished before I left, and that was a project that I'd started, and not a big deal for some of the other agencies, but it was $1 million a gate, which PVID's budget every year is like $5 million, so that's a big deal for us. And I initiated a lot of management changes. I feel like some of the things I did was kind of brought PVID out of the Stone Age into a different era. It was pretty old school when I got there. A lot of the accounting procedures and whatnot this is the way we did it since 1930, and this is the way we're going to do it now, and the pecking order with the management between and whatnot. I made quite a few changes that, like the book. I don't know if you've ever read "Sacred Cows Make the Best Burgers," but it basically is about we've done this the same way for 40 years, and okay, but why? Well, it doesn't matter. That's just the way we did it. And there's a lot of changes I made like that were, in that book they tell you, well, just one day don't do it and see if anybody knows the difference. And sure as heck they don't, So anyway, I think that I did a little bit of bringing them out of some old habits. And
did any of the personalities that you ran across surprise you, or are they? And I'm talking about the various general managers of multiple agencies, the folks at the Bureau, the folks at the Colorado River Board. I mean, I don't know that you knew most of them when you came in.
I didn't know any of them when I came in, and maybe I shouldn't say it on film, but I was embraced by all of them, except, as usual, San Diego sat on the corner and never talked to me. But and there was no hard feelings. They just never interfaced with us.
Yeah. Well, you never really had any dealings with San Diego County Water Authority.
No.
I mean, no reason to do that, and you didn't have anything for them. But I don't mean to press you on this, and if it's not there, it's not there. But it occurs to me that you may have had some preconceived notions about, say, Metropolitan when you came into PVID, and then you started dealing with them, and maybe those changed. Is that? Or
Yeah,
because
yeah, that's yeah. Uh, when we started dealing with them, there was some times that uh, we had one time that I think the whole thing felt like it was going to fall apart, and I think both sides were upset, and I really think it was the metropolitan person that they had assigned to us was not telling both sides what the other side was doing.
you're talking about the fallowing program. Okay.
We were negotiating that. The guy that they had as the lead man, because I kind of felt this growing apart, and I thought it was real interesting. So finally, we had a showdown, and Phil Pace called us up to their office, and we sat there, and we had an attorney, and they had an attorney, and we sat there, and we just said we're going to either do this or not, and we sat down there and wrote the program.
Okay.
And
Phil Pace would have been chairman of MW.
He was chairman of the MWD, and I think there was some. I really think that when we got apart, I don't think either side knew what the other side was thinking or doing. There just was a middleman there that was not taking the right message back and forth. Because when we sat down and worked on that, it worked out really good. They had their attorney was. We started reading the contract, and their attorney would read this, and our attorney would say, "Well, why is that in there?" Well, that's a standard MWD statement. Well, this isn't a standard MWD contract, so take it out. Okay. And end of the day, we had a program, and but the only thing that I remember is that when I first came in there, some of the older directors told me that when the first group came down there for that the trial program that went on for a couple of years, that the first person they sent down there, they said he came down and on a chalkboard showed him how much money that water was worth and why their farming wasn't making enough and this and that, and this is why we're going to buy it from you. And they sent him home and said, if you ever send him back, why, just don't. And so they sent somebody else to sit down and talk to him. And
I actually remember that.
you might have been there, huh?
No, I wasn't there, but I heard the fallout. Yeah.
But after that, they got together, and it's worked out. It worked out well.
Okay, well, we're probably coming to an end here. I'm going to throw a real general question at you, and then we'll just call it a day. What haven't we talked about that we should have with regard to Colorado River issues? You know, while you were GM, or even before then, because you've been in the Valley so long. What would you like to leave us with in terms of your thoughts about the Colorado River, sharing water, the soft landing, 4.4 instead of over 5 million acre feet? There's a lot of stuff that continues to rotate out there. So I want to kind of give you a blank page here. And
Well, one thing I'd like to comment on, I guess, is the maybe I'm just soapboxing here, but I see so much in the news of politicians that are going to save the water for the valley, going to save the Yuma water, going to save the Imperial Valley water, going to save and it's people that don't have a clue what goes on, don't know what the law of the river is, don't know what the rules are, but they claim they're going to save the valley, and I just kind of chuckle because they don't have a clue, they don't have anything to do with it, but I think these valleys are safe. I think nobody's going to steal all the water. The law of the river won't allow it. But in today's time, you see so many people that are soapboxing these issues and battling things that really could be good collaboration if they would just stay out of it and let the players play. And it wouldn't hurt anybody. It would be helpful to everybody. But a lot of outsiders would like to think they have a place at the table. And
Along those lines, since you brought it up, did you happen to see the story only about a couple of weeks ago where Nevada is trying to press to renegotiate the 1922 compact because, as you know, Nevada got the short straw in that deal because nobody lived in Nevada at the time. But there are several. It's exactly what you're talking about. There are several politicos in the Las Vegas area that would like to renegotiate a contract. I mean, the probability of that happening is
the
not going to happen.
The law of the river is, as Roy Mann used to say, he said said that any laws, he says, change over time without the laws being changed. It's just the mentality and the philosophy of the judges and the people that are interpreting the laws change because society changes, but the laws don't change.
Right.
And I don't know how you're going to change the basic. That's the compact is the basic first step on the law of the river. So I don't know how they're going to do anything.
I have no clue.
I haven't either. But
all right. Well, Ed, I want to thank you very much for coming down today.
well, I wish I could have added more, but
Well, that's no. This is great. It's not a matter of adding more. It's a matter of adding what you know and what you think, and that's good. I mean, interestingly enough, you really weren't on the river, and by that I mean with an agency for that many years.
15 years is all. Yeah.
And most of the people that you were dealing with,
Career people.
yeah, they've been there for 20, 30, 40.
2 or 3 different agencies, some of them. And
Absolutely. But this was great. Thank you very much for your time. And
thank you.
we'll call it a day.
All right.